MySQL workbench, you can create a connection. I have created a couple of connections, but by clicking this plus here, you can create new connection. In this window, you can set up your new connection. I call it DB, for example, and the connection method, I leave it as standard. And here in the parameters, you can write down the configuration of server because now I am connecting to the local server. Host name can be localhost. The port is 3306. I have a root user as a username, and when I click on test connection and enter my password to connect to the server, it says it successfully made the MySQL connection. Click on OK, and now I have new connection here. When I double click on the connection, I can connect to the server. I can see my database here in its schema section, and I can see the other settings in the administration section. When you connect to MySQL server, you can see the MySQL workbench. On the left side, you can see two tabs, administration and schemas. You should see a default database named sys created by the system. If you don't see any database here, or you see an error here, it means that either you did not install MySQL server on your machine, or you had some problem with connecting to the MySQL server. On the right side, you can see an environment to write your SQL queries. There's a toolbar on top, an icon to create new SQL environment, open your SQL queries, create new schema, create tables, and something like that. And here you can see some icons on top of your SQL writing environment. Open new script, save your script, run your SQL queries, run SQL command inline, and some other icons that you have for managing SQL queries. If I want to add more queries environment, I can click on the SQL, and as you can see, there are more pages to write SQL queries. I don't need all of them. I just need, for example, one environment here for writing queries. On the bottom, you can see messages that you get when you run your queries. For now, I want to create a new database. To create a new database, I right click on this area, click on create a schema. I write down the name of database, university, click on apply, and as you can see, when you click apply, it shows the SQL command that you should use to run and to create a new database. I click apply. It says it executed the SQL command successfully. I click on close button, and on the left side you should see the new database. I close this window, click on my database, and I can see some objects below my database: tables, views, store procedures, and functions. This is how we create new database. Apart from that, you can create database manually. I write down the command, for example, create database university 1. I run this command and I should see a new database on the left side, and I refresh this area. Yes, I can see that, but I don't need that. That's why instead of create, I just write down drop, and as you can see, the second database will be removed from the schema list. To change table information, we can right click on each table and we can um, click on alter table, and then we can see the table structure. We can add a field to this table, like we can change the data type, and if a table has foreign key, for example, we can change foreign key, and even we can change the table name and other information regarding regarding each field. For example, primary key, or the field is unique or not, or the increment or not, um, and even we can change the data type, but you should be careful regarding changing the data type of each field, because, for example, if you change the data type of um, one value, which is character to integer, you may um, lose your data. Okay, so changing the structure of tables affects on your records. Okay, another things regarding altering and dropping table is when you right click on each table, you have several options. One of the options is drop table. Drop tables remove the table from your database. It's very dangerous command. When you remove a table from your database, you remove all the uh, records inside of the table. Okay, when I create the database, now it's the time to create tables, relational tables. To create a table, I can right click on tables, click create table, and now on the right side I can see a window that I can write the table name. For example, I want to create a table for students, call it a student, and now I can write down the columns and fields. Student ID, for example, I consider as a string, so I select varchar, how many characters. I consider it 100, it's a primary key, shouldn't be null, and some other information here. For example, AI means auto increment. I write down a student name here, consider it 45 characters, can be null, and I leave it as it is. The second one, the third one is, for example, age. Age should be integer, right? And can be null, for example. Student city, I live as varchar, but 100 characters. And yeah, uh, we can create a table using this setting, and finally we can click on apply, and as you can see, this is the command to create a table. Create table university student. We have 4 columns here: student ID, student name, age, city, and as you can see, student ID is primary key, right? Click on apply, successfully apply to a database, close and close. When I click on tables, I can see the new table created, and I can see the columns of this table, 4 columns we created, and there's no foreign key, for example, and that's it. Inserting records into a table is when we want to insert a value uh, to to a table, then we should make sure that the value that we are inserting into the table has the same data type that we have in the table. For example, in course table, we have course ID, course name, and credit. And credit, we know that it is integer, and it can accept integer data type into the table. But instead of integer, if I want to insert a new record, for example, to this table, but uh, the value for credit, instead of 3, I put it in a quotation as a string or character. um, I mentioned this as 3 instead of having a number. It shouldn't allow me to insert record and correct integer value. Okay, so that's why I should have a value for that. um, but if I consider this as integer, then it should allow me to insert record into the table. Another thing is the value for course name is a string. If I insert here a number, and if I want to insert that number into the table, because the data type is a string and this is integer, it converts integer to a string and insert record into the table. Let's run that, and we can see that it 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 successfully inserted the records into the table. When I browse the table, we can see 1, 2, 3 has been inserted into the database. I can change it to a course name here, and I can apply that, and that's it. And we can see that the new value has been updated and has been inserted into the table. So this is how we insert records into the database. um, um, because the value for a string, for example, here is wider than integer, it converts number to a string or characters. Okay. uh, Another point regarding inserting record is when we want to insert multiple values into the table. Instead of having multiple insert commands, we can have insert into course um, command, and in the values we can duplicate these values. For example, we can add records using parentheses, and then all these records will be inserted into the database. When I run this command, I can see that here 3 rows affected. It means that 3 rows were added to my table. And as you can see in this table, um, those 3 rows were added to my table. Okay, this is how we insert records in the database. I will add some other records to other tables as well, so that we can have some values for that, um, as well as enrollment. So for a student, I consider Y100, 100, age 23, Halifax, for example. Personal information of students um, in will be inserted into this table. and we have information regarding city, age, and student name and student ID into this table. I apply these three records, and we have three records here in this table as well. Now, when we have the information about the student and course, it's time to insert information about their enrollment into this um, enrollment table. Keep in mind that information about a student ID and course ID um, is very important, because student ID should come from the student table. Course ID should come from a student course table. That's why we cannot insert new values or values that they don't exist in other tables, right? So for enrollment, I insert the student ID. Let's assume that I insert an ID, insert a student ID that not exist in the other table, but MGSC 5106. I'm sure that this exists. Section 3, it, this can be integer, right? And 2020 semester fall. Okay, because I enforced MySQL to use referential integrity, and these values are coming from the other tables, it shouldn't allow me to insert this record into this table. When I click on apply and click on apply, it gives me an error because those values not exist into the other table. So instead of 109, I change it to 101, and when I apply that, it should be successful. Okay, now we have one record here. The same for course ID. And as you can see, I didn't enter any value for enrollment ID, because in the table design I mentioned that this enrollment ID is an auto incremental field. It means that this field will be automatically inserted based on a number. Okay. Um, okay. The second, let's assume that the same student takes another course, right? But this course never exists. Into database section 3, 2020, again, fall. Apply, apply, error. It gives me an error, so I cannot enter that record into the database. Instead of that, I can use, for example, MGSC 5127, and I can apply that, and I can see that this command is run successfully. I want to create more tables in my database. Um, the second table that I want to create is course table. I call it course. Course has a course ID. Course ID can be varchar, a string of 100 characters. Each course has a name, course name, and credit. The credit can be integer. After creating course table, I create my third table, enrollment. Enrollment has a enrollment ID, can be integer. It will be our primary key. I can consider it as auto increment as well. Automatically can we can assign a number to enrollment. In enrollment, we have a student ID. student ID is the same student ID that we have in another table, so I can consider as varchar, and the specification should be the same as the other field. So we consider 100 characters. In another table, we considered 100 here. Course ID, each student take a course, and course ID should be the same as course ID of other table. We have a section ID or section, simply we can consider as integer. What else? Year can be integer, and semester. For semester, we can consider it as varchar. Okay, so when we specify the fields, as you know, we have two foreign keys here: a student ID and course ID. We should specify these foreign keys in this table. Here we have a option foreign key, and we can specify the foreign keys here. We have one student ID that refers to a student. On the right side, we specify a student ID here to a student ID to the other table. MySQL automatically recognizes the correct field, and this is the referential integrity. On update, we check that, but we can change it to cascade. It means that when the student ID is changed to the student table, in the student table, change the student ID in the enrollment. We have another foreign key, course ID, refers to course. Course ID of this table should be connected to course ID of the course table. Again, we can change the referential integrity. If course ID is changed in the course table, change the course ID in enrollment table. Apply, and this is the SQL. Apply, and that's it. Now we have three tables, and these three tables are connected to each other. Create a table. You can insert record to table. To view a table information, you can click on table and you can see columns, indexes, foreign keys, triggers. This course table has course ID, course name, and credit. To view the table content, you can right click on that and you can select rows. I have the limit of 50,000. You can change this limit in the MySQL setting. The default is 1000 records. So when you click that, you see the list of records of this table. Now my table is empty, and I can start inserting record into this table. For example, I can write mgsc 5106 course name database credit 3. When I insert one record in the table, I can click on apply, and you can see the SQL comment here to insert a record into the table. Click apply, and now we have one record in our table. On top you can see the SQL comment when you want to select records from this table. But again, if I close this window, right click on select rows, I can see the list of records of this table. Apart from that, you have this icon here When you click on that, you can see the list of record as well. And I can add another record, 5108, for example, statistics, and again credit 3, apply, apply, and then we can see two records were inserted into this table. You can insert records into the table using SQL command as well. For example, insert into course, and you can write down the columns, but if I don't write column names, it means that I want to insert records into all the fields that I have. Values, for example, MGS C 5127. The name of course is data visualization, and the credit is 3, right? In this way I am adding another record into the table. When I run this command, uh, oh, I have error here because I didn't select the database. So I can select this database as my default database, or I can use database name here before course to say MySQL that this table belongs to this specific database, for example, university. But in any case, to uh, select the database as a default database, I can right click on the database and select set as default schema. In that way, um, MySQL considers this database as default database, and when I run this command, it inserts one record into the table. So if I get the records of this table, I should see 3 records here. The thing is, the order of the columns should be the same as the the values that we have. For example, the first column is course code, the second column is course name, and the third column is credit. If you swap this value with this value, so data visualization will be taken place in course code. That's why it's very important to have the order correctly. If you want to insert uh, records and values to specific columns, then you should specify the column names here. For example, I want to um, insert records for course ID and course name. So I select course ID, and the second course name, and for example, the fourth record that I want to insert to this table is predictive modeling, right? But I don't have the credit of this course, right? In this way, I am uh, inserting a record to a table only on these two columns. So if I run this SQL command, and again if I select the rows, I should be able to see that record but without any credit, right? This is how we insert records into the table. There are a couple of notes here. First note is you should insert primary key. It's obligatory to insert a value for primary key. If you don't insert anything for primary key, or you want to insert null value for that, it doesn't allow, to insert records. It says the column course ID cannot be null right here. That's why course ID is primary key. Another thing is you cannot insert a repetitive record for primary key. For example, MGSC 5125 again cannot be inserted to this table. uh, the name is different, but the value for primary key is the same. So when I run this command again, it says duplicate entry for MGSC 5125. These are the notes that you should have in mind when you want to insert records into a table. Okay. um, yeah, and that's it for inserting records into a table. Now that we have three tables and we connected these three tables using their foreign keys, we want to see their relationships. One of the things that you can do in MySQL is reviewing the relationship using reverse engineering option. And on database um, menu on top, you can see revenue reverse engineer option. When you click on reverse engineer, then it says that in which database you want to connect. Again, the current database, you enter the password for your current database, you press continue, select the name of the database. You might have multiple databases here. Select the one that you want. Um, Click on continue, continue, and then you says that uh, then Microsoft says that do you want to import the MySQL tables? We say yes. If you don't want to import all the tables, you just select the ones that you want. And it says that there are three total objects, three selected. It means that we have three tables. Execute, and after executing successfully, then click on continue and close. On the left side, you can see a navigator that to entity relationship diagram. When you um, yeah, when you select the tables, you can see the relationship between these three tables. And as you can see, the notation is crow food. And there are two relationships between a student and enrollment and course. The relationship is one to many. This means one, and this means many, and here the same. And here you can see the primary key. Course ID here is primary key, student ID is here is primary key, and you have a primary key of enrollment table. And when you mouse over on the tables, you can see how these tables are connected to each other. The green part shows the relationship. Enrollment table has two columns, two foreign keys. A student ID is connected to a student table, and this course ID refers to course table. And you can print out this entity relationship diagram. You can change it, or you can delete the relationship. Yeah, there are several things that you can do. When you click on edit relationship, you can see there is a caption here, and if this foreign key has a name, you can change the information of the relationship. Cardinality says one to many. For example, you can change it to one or anything that you want. And yeah, and then you can save this as the diagram that you want. When you save this, it will be saved with MWB. Um, for example, university ER is the name that I select for this entity relationship. And there are other things, for example, you can add more objects or tables to your um, relationships, or you can drop the relationship by clicking or right clicking on the relationship and click delete. Another way to create a database is using model. From the database connection, you can click on file, new model. When you create new model, you can see this environment on the left side. You can see description, right side. In the center, you have entity relationship diagram, your database. You can add tables, views, groups, and on the right side, you have some object templates for creating a database. Um, by clicking of each template, you can create a sample template database. Let's assume that we want to create a database for university. Um, Here is the icon for new database. You can change the specification of this database, or you can create a database using this icon here. There is a toolbar here that allows you to save the model, to create new tables, to create new database, something like that. When I click on that, you can see new schema is added here. So I don't need this schema, I delete that. But I want to change this, so I select a name for that. I call it mini, let's say university. Um, and when I create and rename this um, database, then I can add my tables by clicking on add the tables. I can create new tables. I have a student table, for example. I have a ID for a student. I call it the student ID. It can be um, integer, primary key, name, or a student name. It can be varchar, can be 500 characters. Age of a student can be integer, and something like address for a student. And after creating this table and creating the primary key of this table, I can save this table, and I can change the specification of this table later. So I save this table, and I can see there is one table name a student, create another table named course, and each course has a course ID. I can consider integer, can be primary key. Each course has a course name. It can be a varchar or a string, 100 characters, and credit, which can be integer. Okay. In this way, um, we can assign the column names to each table. I close this table as well. I close this one as well. And I want to create a table for relationship between course and a student. So I call it enrollment. In this table, I have enrollment ID as a primary key. Apart from that, I have a course ID. It should be, like I said, the same data type of the course ID. In the course table, we have a student ID. It should be again integer because the student ID in the student table was integer as well. Um, I have one primary key. It can be auto increment, which is added by a number automatically. It has two foreign key. Apart from that, I have semester. So this semester is a character, and um, I have a year, and this year can be integer. And we can consider to have a grade for a course as well. This can be, let's say, double or float. So in this way, we can record information about each student, its taken course, and the semester and the year of the um, course. Okay, now I should specify the foreign key. I have two foreign keys. I call it student foreign key, and it refers to a student table. Um, Student ID from this table um, should be connected to student ID from the student table. I can consider cascade as referential integrity rule. Another foreign key is course foreign key. It should connect. It should be connected to the course table, and again I can consider cascades for this as well. And now I can see I have three tables. I can now I can have three tables. I can create my entity relationship diagram. For entity relationship diagram, I can add my tables to this diagram. I have course, I have a student, and I have a relationship between a student and course, which is called enrollment, because we specified the foreign key in this table. When I drag and drop this table, it identifies the relationship between course, student, and enrollment automatically. We can double click on the relationship, we can change the caption, change the foreign keys, the type of relationship. It automatically detects one-to-many relationship, which is correct. Here again, by double click on this relationship, we can change the specification. Again, one-to-many, which is correct. If I want to add another relationship, I can drag and drop um, the, the fields, or I can specify the foreign key in the table, in the edit table. Or if I want to drop the relationship, I can right click on the relationship and click delete. In this way, I create the entity relationship diagram. I can save this model. I call it, let's say, a mini university. And by this mini university, I create my model. And yeah, as you can see, I have one entity relationship diagram. I can insert record into the tables. Before inserting records to tables, I can add users, add roles to the tables, so that specific users can access to the specific objects of this model. On the left side, you can see the um, history of the tasks that I have done on this model. Okay, let's insert some records. By clicking on each table, there is a tab named Insert, and I can directly add new course. Let's say we have a database with credits 3, and we have another record, other course, again credit 3, and we have two records in this course table. Yeah, we save the changes. We have student information. Again, we are in the insert tab. Student ID 100. We have student name, student age, and we have student city. Let's assume that we have another student as well, and another address. Just make it simple, and this enrollment table, again I save that. Enrollment is auto incremental. Let's assume that we have one course. Student 100 takes this course in fall 2020, and it doesn't have any grade now. We have another course for the same student, and in fall 2020, and we have for another student the same course database, again fall 2020. Let's assume that we have a grade here, let's say 70. We store that, and this records in the database. On top you can see some icons here to apply the changes. You can click on the apply changes. You can export the data, you can import some data, you can filter some records, for example MGSC or 100, and you can see the list of records here. Apart from that, you can add records, or you can change the deleted records from a database. So it should be okay now. We have three tables and we have some records here. After inserting the records into the tables, then you can write SQL script. And by clicking on add a script, you can write your SQL query here. For example, insert into course values, let's say some values we can write down here, and based on information that we have, we can add records, or we can write select comments, alter comments, drop comments here. And if we have some errors, let's say here, we can this environment can say what kind of error you have. You can save this script and run it in another environment, let's say. But if you don't have any error and you save it, you can see the script here. You can add more scripts to your model, and you can add more comments or notes to your model. In this way, we create a database, we add entity relationship model, we can write some scripts and run the scripts in the MySQL environment.